Hello everyone, it's your Dutchman Foremouse and welcome to this brand new super exciting video in The Sims 4. So last week, thanks to the EA Gamechangers program, I was allowed to fly to San Francisco in California to check out the brand new expansion pack for The Sims 4 Discover University, which is coming out later this week, and I'm super excited to tell you all the ins and outs of this new expansion pack in this brand new speed build, because today I'm actually building student housing in The Sims 4, because obviously with a university related pack there comes university housing, and you know me as a builder, that's obviously the first thing I'm checking out. So you can expect two videos from me on this brand new pack, which will be released before the release of the expansion pack. Two videos which I've recorded while I was at the EA headquarters in Redwood Shores in California, which I'll talk about in another video. I'll talk about like the entire experience of being there, and also in that video I'll talk a little bit about the game, but mainly this video will be all about like build mode in the brand new expansion pack, and generally just the ins and outs of the game and what I've come to learn while I was there. So today I'm building university housing, and in the next video I'll be building a more commons area, meaning it's like a study spot where your Sims can study, because obviously Sims will need to study in order to get their degree, and also it's a place like with a canteen where Sims can hang out a bit and rest a bit while they're studying. So that's really cool. But today obviously the most important part of university is dorms, and therefore today I'm building a university home complex. However, before I'm getting all into the Sims 4 university build and buy mode options, I'll actually point out something which you just saw happening on the screen, and that is something that comes with a patch which will be available for everyone, and that is that you can now extend columns in the Sims 4, meaning you don't have only one level of column, but you can actually extend them, so you can click and drag the columns in order to make them as high as 2 or even 3 or even 4 stories, which is really cool for architecture freaks like I am, and definitely all of you builders which are watching this video, because as you can see I can just extend the column as much as I want, which gives us so much more flexibility with regards to build mode in The Sims 4. And the coolest thing is that it doesn't only come with The Sims 4 University, but it's actually coming for everyone in the brand new patch. So yeah, that's just a heads up. Even if you're not planning on getting the pack, you will still get that feature, which is really cool. And then now it's time to actually give you sort of a broad overview of what the Sims 4 Discover University is all about. Obviously, your Sims will be able to go to university, and there's a brand new world coming with this new pack, as you probably saw already, because we're building in a new world. This world is called Rochester, and there's 2 universities here. I'm personally building in the Foxbury University area, but you've also got the Rochester or the Bride University area, which is a little bit more traditional. I'm actually not covering it in the video because I personally really preferred the modern overview, but there's definitely many people also building in the Rochester University of Rochester area, so you can definitely check out their builds. But I'm building in like the more technology-based university, meaning that there is like a lot of nature sciences there, and like mathematics and all that kind of stuff. And on the other university there's more things like arts, but also languages and those kinds of sciences. I'm obviously, as you know, a builder, so I've not really looked into all the degrees you can get and what it works like. I've heard very many things of different people, but if you really want to learn a lot more about live mode, then this is probably not the video to watch, because this is really based on build mode and also the game from the perspective of someone who's totally 100% a builder. So that's just to make sure that you're prepared. What I did find funny to learn about live mode, however, is that there's like an actual rivalry between these 2 universities, which is very obvious because obviously they're like close together, and therefore whenever 2 things are sort of competing who's the best, there's always like a little bit of rivalry. Wow, that's literally like the worst word to say for a non-native, I guess. But what you should think of is people throwing like toilet paper over statues and just trying to sort of like, you know, do some dirty things to each other's campuses and each other's organizations, because there's different organizations as well which you can join, which actually relates back to the student housing, because as you can see, this student housing is based on a penthouse, but you can also make some independent student housing. You can even choose that lot type in a world which is not Brightchester, meaning you can have your sim live on Willow Creek and make sure that that is a university lot, and then or university housing lot, and then make them live there and actually travel to the university world in order to go to university. However, just like in real life, it's actually just a lot more fun to be on campus, and that is exactly what this building is. As you can see, it is very similar to the penthouses which we got in The Sims 4 City Living, because this student housing is actually built on top of just a tall building, which is probably also all filled with dorms. And what I'm building is a student housing complex, meaning that there's very many dorms. I've also decided to make a common area and a study place, and my interpretation of this was really Dutch, and that's funny to notice because also generally they did try with the pack to go a little bit more broad than just the American system of universities. That's actually a comment someone mentioned about like tuition fees. Some people said it was way too cheap, but then the developer said, well, in some countries it's free, and some Finnish person actually agreed on that, because in Finland, like, tuition is free. In Europe or in the Netherlands, relative to the US, it's sort of cheap as well, but in the US, obviously, tuition is super expensive, so they sort of had to average that out. But that's also the same for like some of the features in build mode and just in the pack in general. For instance, it's not possible to add a stove on the lot, because in the US it's very common not to actually cook food yourself, but go to some place, and then within your tuition, I believe, or within some subscription you pay for, like each month for each year, there's a number of meals you can get, like at a common place, meaning you, like the student cannot actually cook at the place themselves, which is totally unbelievable for Dutch people, because we're very used to like cooking together, and it's actually like a really fun activity, you know, for whenever you're planning on doing something fun besides like or after studying. It's often that you know, take some beers and you go cooking together at someone's house, and then just you know, cook together. Therefore, I also just made a kitchen in this build, and in the end I did manage to add a stove, because with bb.enable free build, it's actually possible to still change the lot even though a sim lives there, just like this bb enable free build cheat gives you some more options in the game itself already as well, also before this expansion pack. So with that cheat, I managed to actually add a stove after the sim moved in, because you get some kind of error message that your sim cannot move in because the lot doesn't suffice, because there is actually a stove on there. But that's really funny to notice at the event, that their universities actually differ quite a lot around the world. But therefore I've sort of gone for the Dutch approach. But obviously, if you really don't want to have a kitchen in the build, once you download it, you can just kick it out and, you know, put some extra roommates in there, because I'm sure the house lord or the landlord will actually really like that, because he'll get more money. And your sim can move into the dorm or the student housing, and the amount of beds that there is in the, like the house or on the lot is the number of roommates you will have, and those will be just put in automatically. They will live autonomously. Wow, that's sort of a hard word as well, I guess. But rivalry is still like the worst, I guess. But what I wanted to say is that they just spawn in the house. So you've got roommates, and you can kick them out if you don't like them. You can then choose or put an ad out to get new roommates into your house, but you can't actually control them, just like in real life. You know, your roommates might every now and then do something which you really don't like, but there's not too much you can do about it, because you cannot really control the roommates which are living in your house. You can assign a bed though, so that means that you can say, okay, that's my room, because otherwise it would sort of get messy, obviously. So you can have your own dorm, and even though it's not possible to edit the lot without cheats, it is possible to sort of build in live mode, which is sort of weird or might sound weird, but it's very obvious. You know, you've got objects in your inventory, and that way you can move those objects around. So you can add like a radio, or you can add a rug or a poster or books or whatever in your room just to personalize it. So even without actually going into build mode, it's actually possible to decorate your room. And there's, for many of the new objects, two different styles. And you'll probably see that once I actually get into furnishing this build. But for many, there's the more traditional style, which would definitely fit with the Ubright University, so the more traditional one, a little bit better. And then there's very many more modern objects, which sort of reminded me of IKEA. Some of the objects were literally IKEA, even though I'm not too, they didn't call it IKEA because, you know, that's name branding stuff. But it was clearly inspired by IKEA. So that's cool because, you know, that's very realistic, at least in the Netherlands. Like every student housing is filled up with IKEA, and that's sort of a little bit more modern and more designish. So that is what you see a lot in Foxbury. And I'm actually like starting to furnish my first dorm here, and I've sort of gone for a combination of the different room types, and especially also the different types of roommates you can have. Obviously, you can have very neat roommates, but you can also have ones which totally don't clean after themselves and have a super messy room. So I've sort of gone for a combination of that. I've got to say though, with the objects that I like the objects in build mode, but very many of them are a sort of very typical for student housing, which is cool because for this pack that means it's totally realistic and it really fits the pack. However, for me as a builder, I, as you know, really like to create more modern and especially sort of stylish, designish places, and therefore the IKEA stuff doesn't always really fit in with that. So therefore I felt like I'm not too sure how often I will use many of the items. There's some really cool items in there, which I'll definitely use a lot. For instance, I really like the pile of like pallets, which you see, but I would actually have liked to see more of those sort of improvised furniture pieces, because I actually know very many students who sort of create their own furniture or do something creative with, like, say, beer crats and like just a shelf and put it on there, and then you've got a table and, you know, very like unique items. And I've come across some of them, but I would have liked to see slightly more of that. However, I've got to say that we had to build with only the base game and this university expansion pack installed, meaning that I didn't have access to any of the other items I would normally have. Therefore, I did get a chance to really see them and not fall back on like my old behavior of just choosing some of the items I know already. However, there's some items I used often from different packs which would totally fit in with this pack as well. Say the barbecue barrel, which came with The Sims 4 Jungle Adventures. That's like perfect for university housing. Just like the little thing with all the little light bulbs on it, that's perfect to create like some nice outdoor area. Would really like to have added some greenery on the walls as well, just to create some cozy place. So definitely, once I've got my hands on the full game installed on my own PC, meaning that I've got all the expansions, I'll create some like really cool dorm or even cooler dorm. This is really for those who have the base game or just the base game and want to get started with their first expansion pack, being The Sims 4 University or Discover University. But I would have sort of liked to see more clutter items or just some random decorational items, because that's stuff you just generally see a lot in university housing, obviously, and in dorms, because dorms tend to be really messy, and you know, you need some items to make it messy, and there's quite some of them, but I feel like if you've only got this expansion pack installed, it might not feel like it's enough, you know, clutter items just to feel satisfied. But I've heard very many of the other Sims being super like excited about the items coming with build mode and build buy mode, and I think it's mainly me really being into the more stylish designer furniture and a little bit less into the truly realistic real life furniture that makes this a slight problem. Yeah, with regards to build mode, it really is realistic, a realistic representation of what you see in student housing. And there's also quite some build mode items, because I've not done a build mode overview, but you will probably see very many of the items coming with this pack to be shown in either this video or my next video. But I've got to say that, for instance, there's very many windows, very many doors, which is really cool. So that's actually good, because we tend to sort of lack those items in some of the other packs, or sometimes they're not really thought of too well. But in this pack, it's really cool. Also, we've now got toilet stalls and we've got bikes. But I've got a question about bikes still, which I remember I should have asked at Sims Camp, because bikes are really a cool new feature of the Sims University, but I'm not too sure. Discover University. I keep saying university just because it's quicker, but it's just called Discover University, obviously. But I've actually had a question about bikes, because I believe I heard a Sim Guru say they were coming in an update for everyone, but I'm actually not totally sure about that. So I've still got to figure that out. If it is, it would be really cool, but if it's not, it's sort of obvious, because you need some cool specific features for the pack. But adding bikes is really cool, because seriously, Dutch student life is all about bikes, and generally, as you probably know, the Netherlands, people there bike a lot, and literally I don't have a driving license yet, and I'm not like taking public transport to get to university. You just bike for like 10 minutes or 5 minutes and then you're there, and that's basically the same for all Dutch students. They all bike, and just Dutch people in general bike a lot. So it's really cool to see bikes being added to the game, because for me it makes the game a lot more realistic, especially now that it's all about student life, because for student life bikes are literally essential. And a cool note is that you can actually drive bikes inside as well. I saw some simmers do it, like the simmers who actually do play in live mode, and it actually looked really funny. It is not a bug, they actually did it on purpose, so that's pretty cool. And they're very cool decorational items. I know quite some people who've got like some racing bikes, some beautiful bike, and they actually hang it up on the wall. Would have been a cool option if they would have done that as well, being able to use your bike a little bit more as decoration rather than just putting it in a room. But it does add for some cool clutter or just some cool decorational items, which I wanted, like I just mentioned, in the game. And there's mini fridges as well, because, well, in the Netherlands, there's actually not very many people or students having a mini fridge, because you're very used to just having a fridge in the commons area where the kitchen is as well. But like you just learned, dorms in the US tend not to have any kitchens, or just the student housing complexes don't even have kitchens. So then you really need to have your own mini fridge in order to have some cold drinks. So I did put it in this room because obviously, we've got a new item, so it's cool. But I forgot to add a microwave on top of it, because it is possible to stack the items like that, which I think is a cool, little detail, which is always really funny to learn about when you're at SimScam, because at SimScam you really talk to the producers and they give a little presentation and you get insight into what they thought about when creating the pack and what little details they really think finish up the pack, which I totally agree with. And then now we're actually moving into the commons area. As you can see, I'm creating a kitchen, which is not a very typical American thing to add. But this is sort of the Dutch interpretation of student housing, I guess. Even though I must say it sort of looks luxurious from the outside, I maybe should have made it look slightly more worn down. Would have been a cool option to have that in build mode as well. But I can imagine that's sort of weird. But maybe having some more, worn down wall papers or just more clutter for outside would have been cool. Because like I said, I've got some items in mind which would really make it a typical student housing place. And it would have been cool to see some interpretation of that into this Discover University pack as well, because now you have to rely on some other packs in order to really create the typical student housing. Even though I must say student housing differs a lot per student, so therefore there is not one typical student housing complex, but I have sort of intended to make this one a little bit chaotic, or at least, from the outside you've got all the flags and all the typical student things. There's a ping pong table outside, which is, by the way, a really cool extra feature as well. So I've sort of done my best to make this look like cheery and like a typical student place. but yeah, it might look sort of modern. The reason I did like all the units, as you saw in the beginning, is really based on a unit measure of just 4 squares wide, and then making it lengthy, and then putting like 5 of them across like the place, and then in the middle there's some like entrance area with stairs going up. That is because in the Netherlands, very many of these student places tend to be designed like that, sort of having a bright color and then very clearly being built in a grid so that you can really see what the individual units are when you're standing in front of it. So it's very clear that it's like different little homes within one big piece. So therefore it felt very typical, and I think Dutch people will really be able to relate to this kind of student housing. But I'm very interested to actually learn about all your experiences with university and what university is like or college is like in the places that you live, because it's really cool to imagine. You know, at SimScam there were very many nationalities already as well, but like my viewers are from way more nationalities. So please let me know in the comments down below where you are from and what student life is like in your country, because I'm really excited to learn more about that. As you can see, by the way, I've added like the lights at the roof or at the ceiling of this common place as well, because that's very common for Dutch student housing as well. They tend to do a lot of house parties, especially the bigger the house gets, the more house parties and the more extreme the house parties get. So I've decided to use that just as some clutter or just some decoration in these houses as well. And there's very many posters coming in buy mode because yes, students like their posters and they're really good decoration for the houses in my opinion. So that's fun, and that actually makes the place more realistic. You'll see at the end of the overview that it's like not mainly the most architecturally pleasing build I've done, but it is sort of realistic to what student housing is like, I guess. So it is more of a realistic build than a very inspiring, very architecturally pleasing build. I mean, you see me adding the beer little armchair, which obviously doesn't really look that good, but it is cool because, you know, in student housing, you know, they just found it somewhere on the street and they'll add it in their house, and in that way it sort of is realistic. I'm adding very many of the bikes in the corridor because in the Netherlands that would definitely happen. Yeah, we really put our bikes everywhere, and especially in student cities. You've also got mobikes, or at least in the study or place I'm studying at, and those are like very tiny bikes. They tend to be used by international students a lot, and they're like on a subscription base, so you can just take them and leave them anywhere you want. And those tend to end up in trees and on top of roofs a lot. And I actually saw a picture of like a huge pile of those bikes all put into each other a couple of days ago. So really, bikes are a big thing in student life. Like I actually said, like more than enough already, I guess. For the exterior, I just put like some items here to make sure it looked sort of chaotic. Like I said, I added the flags. I'm actually adding a barbecue, but then I realized that barbecue is a forbidden object on a housing lot as well, which I can sort of imagine, because if you really look like strictly, it is sort of dangerous to have students have a barbecue on the lot, but I don't think that's really the reason they did it. But the main problem is that once you've got a barbecue, you can actually make the Sims have themselves like cook for themselves, which they didn't want because that's not the American way of doing it. However, for me, like having some inappropriate barbecue on an irresponsible place in the student housing is very typical. So I added it, and then I realized that I couldn't actually make it being used as a student housing complex, so I got to have it removed. Which is weird though, is that there's some catering system or some catering unit which you can actually add to your house. So I believe it even comes with like a cook. So that means that in a little student complex like this one, you'd be able to have an actually catered place with a cook cooking for the Sims, which I don't think is the most realistic and like the cheapest option. I'm not too sure though if the cook actually shows up in student housing as well, or if it only shows up when you place that item or that unit in like a commons area or just a common venue. And then I just put in some sofas, a ping pong table, just some seats, very many bikes, just to make it look cozy. By the way, important to mention is that Brightchester is actually just a full livable world. So you can also make people or sims who are not students have them live there. However, obviously, it is a lot more fun to experience this city when you've got students around, because this world is really based around the two universities that are located in it. And yeah, with regards to style, it sort of is. Yeah, like the Foxbury area sort of looks like Willow Creek. To remind you, this is the Foxbury area, so more the modern area. And then you've also got a more traditional world, which is very related to Windenburg, the other Sims 4 world, and which, if you ask me, looks sort of European because of all the little houses and the fact that they're separate houses all placed together. It actually reminds me of very many Dutch cities. So that's cool that they, for the more traditional university, actually added or actually made like a very big difference between those two worlds. Many people actually commented also about whether the classes are rabbit holes or not, and they are. And I've seen some people being disappointed about that. Yeah, because I'm not a live mode player, I actually don't really care about it. I've heard many people say though that the classes themselves tended to be boring in like previous University Sims games, so they were glad that they were actually removed, or at least that you don't actually see your sims literally going to the class. And I've heard that it is sort of a challenge to like make everything fit into your subject or schedule, because obviously students who are sort of active tend to have a very busy subject or schedule. I know that for myself as well. And I actually just read that, you know, like I mentioned, they have to go out to get a meal for themselves, but those places close as well. I guess in real life they probably close as well. Anyways, maybe you've got some places where you can get food 24 hours, but that's not really sustainable, because I mean, you'd have to throw a lot of food away when you don't know when to expect people. But they close at certain times, so you've got to make sure that your Sims is able to juggle all the balls of having like committees and doing like these debate workshops and actually studying and having friends and doing cool activities and getting food at the right time. So I believe it's sort of a challenge to make your sim like successful in the studying career. I really thought the gameplay trailer was cool because that really portrayed that idea very nicely. If you haven't seen it yet, you can check it out on the official Sims YouTube channel, I guess. Yeah, I'm sure about that actually. And here I'm finishing up some of the last dorm rooms, which are just slightly different than the previous ones. I think I've sort of gone for not too messy rooms. This is actually, I ended up adding the IKEA shelf anyways. I will probably add like the self-made shelf built with like bricks and just shelf wooden pieces, which is really a fitting kind of item which I would like to see more of, would have liked to see more in the game. You know, self-built furniture and just some really weird kind of items which students just found somewhere or built themselves. Obviously I put in a bike because that's just the very typical thing to do. So anyways, important for you to know is that you can actually download this build from the gallery. You can look for gallery ID Dutch Sims Master, and then you'll just see my channel there or my account there, and there you'll be able to download this one, so that when you get the Sims for Discovery University yourself, you'll be able to have this student housing complex in your game, because I can imagine you want to have a place for your sim to get started with. And also I've got a question for all of you, because I'm thinking of maybe doing an around the world building series with regards to like university faculties or university buildings, so it could also be libraries or stuff like that. So if you've got cool suggestions, please let me know, because I'm excited about like the idea of the series, but it would really be cool to have like suggestions from all of you in order to make that series a success. And also, I'm planning on doing a Let's Build, but I'm not too sure what kind of build I should do. So should I just build another dorm area or another dorm building, but then with all the items from the other expansion packs and do that as a Let's Build? Or should I build something specific which is different? Let me know in the comments down below, and then I'll make sure that I'll get started with that Let's Build and with the other speed builds as well. So yeah, this is sort of my, just a speed build in the brand new pack with me telling you some information about the new build mode items. Like I said, if you want to learn more about the live mode options in the Sims 4 Discover University, there's plenty of simmers who were at Sims Camp as well, who probably made some really cool videos about like the live mode and the CAS aspect of the Sims, so make sure you check those videos out as well. For now, I'd like to thank you for watching this video, and remember that there's another one coming, so I hope to see you back later.